We wanted more transactions in the blocks. We wanted to keep costs low for transactions. I think that was really the goal, and to really build a peer-to-peer electronic cash. I think what has evolved now in the Bitcoin world is we have Bitcoin, which is now electronic gold, right? It's digital gold. So less cash. So it's less about velocity. It's more about actually storing and preserving value, right? So it's become an asset versus a utility. And I think Ethereum has tried to build out the utility element, and Solana is now working on the utility element. And there are a whole bunch of other blockchains that are now really driving to grow the utility element associated with a lot of these chains and layer ones and building currency.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have the pleasure to interview Stefan. We actually met at Token 2049 at a full-on interview, but due to technical issues, we couldn't release it as soon as possible. And now, while I was prepping for this interview, we encountered some more technical challenges. It's been insane, but he's with us, and it will be an amazing interview. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, and good to re-encounter and reacquaint ourselves and explore what and how we can, just actually make this work properly. So excited for that.
Yeah, man, it's been a challenge. But
Yeah.
before we jump into what you've been doing and how you provide a very good source of data, could you please tell me a bit more about yourself and your journey into Web3?
Yeah, so look, I've been in crypto for over a decade. I got in 2012, sorry. And basically, I had a developer agency. We were working with developers around the world to sort of help tech companies acquire developers and build applications for their platforms, either by promoting an SDK or, sort of just acquiring them to help populate an app store or enhance the chipsets that were being embedded on devices. And one of those developers wanted to get paid in Bitcoin. And so from there on, it was just like really, oh my God, yeah, this is amazing. Didn't think much about it. User experience was really bad. And then I really, when I had to pay around the world instantaneously, no fees, that was really the peer-to-peer electronic cash that really sort of had that was the moment, right? That was really the aha moment. And so got into Bitcoin, became CEO of Bitcoin.com, scaled that to 500,000 merchants and some 50 million wallets around the world today. And when the governments then told us inflation is coming, we're going to print a lot of money, we're going to shut down the economies, and global trade was going to be eliminated because of the COVID, I just then said, no way, right? And that was the launch of Truflation. But before that, I was in mobile a lot. So I've been a serial entrepreneur. I launched about 11 companies so far. And just really enjoy the learning, the journey of launching new businesses.
Do you still think that Bitcoin has the potential to be this peer-to-peer currency? Because now transaction fees are a little bit more expensive, and back in the day, a lot of people are actually using it to pay. What's your take on it? And I guess if you can tell me a bit more about the block war, where some miners want to have like small and big blocks. Like, what's your take on it?
Yeah, look, I mean, we wanted more transactions in the blocks. We wanted to keep the costs low for transactions. I think that was really the goal, and to really build a peer-to-peer electronic cash. And I think what has evolved now in the Bitcoin world is we have Bitcoin, which is now electronic gold, right? It's digital gold. So less cash. So it's less about velocity. It's more about actually storing and preserving value, right? So it's become an asset versus a utility. And I think Ethereum has tried to build out the utility element, and Solana is now working on the utility element. And there are a whole bunch of other blockchains that are now really driving to grow the utility element associated with a lot of these chains and layer ones and building currency, right? And how do we do that? How do we grow that part of the ecosystem? And I think that's creating new systems on new rails, and how do we take real world information and data and put that on the blockchain. We started with inflation, and now I think we're seeing that evolve into all sorts of other data sets beyond just consumer goods. We're seeing assets, we're seeing labor data that needs to be reflectant of the actual economy at the moment in real time, and doing the same around production and businesses and startups and small medium businesses that are actually the biggest employer in most markets around the world.
And that leads us into the conversation about Trueflation and what you guys do. You provide a price index based on number of data points. So could you just tell me a bit more about it and how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, so the idea was really, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, right? When I think it was Jerome Powell or Janet Yellen that was just saying inflation's only transitory, don't worry, right? And it's like, hang on, any economist will tell you that can't be the case, right? There's zero interest rates. You've just printed $1 trillion and you've shut the economy down. And we're so intertwined on a global basis. How do we manage that? And you look under the carpet in terms of how it's calculated, how important the inflation economy is for driving monetary policy, right? We've seen that now. And so it's 100 years old. They track the data manually. They're up to 6 months delayed. And here we are. We got it real time. We're using API real time feeds. We're tracking 18 million items with 3 price feeds per item. We put it on the blockchain. It's super transparent. It's immutable and it's accessible to everybody. So those are the things that we really tried to focus on and provide a 30x improvement on what we're seeing from the government today, using technology and building for the next wave of innovation and the platform of the future in finance.
And you mentioned two very important words, immutable and accessible and transparent, actually three. So could you just tell me a bit more about how you ensure that you provide that and how do you compare with like traditional financial data? And if you can just run me through that process, that would be super useful.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, we aggregate a lot of data in real time, and the immutability is we write it to the blockchain, and so we can't go back and change it. If we do go back and change it, we have to rewrite a whole new string of code. So it has to be a new string of code, and you can then see that on chain and have access to that. Permissionless in terms of anybody can access it, access the data. It's available. As soon as it's on chain, it's visible for everybody. But also you can go to trueflation.com, go to our website, have a look at all the data that we have there, all the items that we make available to everybody. And we try to educate everybody by making these as visual, appeasing as possible. And then if you're a sophisticated investor or want to really go into the data sets and do your research, you can actually download the data. You need to pay for that, but then you ultimately are getting it at a very good value. Bloomberg Terminal, which most investors use today, costs you anywhere between 2 and 3, depending on the number of features you have per terminal. And so $2,000, right? And what we're doing is charging you for the maximum amount you want to download, you're paying $800, right? And so, yeah, most investors find that actually very appealing. We then wrap it anyway. Yeah. So we make that all available for anybody to self-serve and not have to talk to anybody. If you want to talk to us, we have an intercom chat where you can just chat with us and ask your questions, and we'll try and respond as quickly and expediently as possible.
Could you run me through the process of how to ensure that the data is accurate and how many data points do you collect and how do you identify and choose the right data points when you're like providing this broader or like kind of this data?
Yeah, I mean, we aggregate we take about 18 million data feeds. We aggregate those and we put them into some 50, 60 different subcategories, which then aggregate into 12 categories. 12 categories in sum represent, based on the weighting schedule, the CPI, or the true CPI, as we call it, which is now at about 1.3%. And so that's sort of where, compared to the government, which is up at 2.5%. So yeah, we just do it more in real time, and we tend to be a economic indicator in terms of leading the government numbers anywhere from to about up to about 3 months, where we're ahead of the trend there. In combine, if you combine everything together, certain categories we're up to 6 months ahead in terms of, in the real estate category and property housing, we're up to 6 months ahead of where the government numbers are.
Oh, wow. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's an impressive number. So could you just elaborate on this? Like how do you calculated that you're like 6 months ahead? And I know that there's like lagging data and you collect all the data in real life, but could you just double down on it and explain it a bit further?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, we pull the data in real time. We don't use household panels. The government goes to the households and leverages about 1,000 households, which they rotate on a monthly basis across the US, which are to be a representation of nationwide household spend. We do that using credit card data and census-based aggregation of that information, covering maybe up to about 10% of the whole population. We have alone on our website, if you go to Truflation.com under tools, we have a calculator where you can calculate your personal inflation. Alone, that site has had over 250,000 submissions in the last 2 months alone. So we're seeing a greater volume of submissions which are credible, right? I mean, there are a lot of submissions that you can't take serious. And so we have to wane out a lot of the data sets so that we can come to a clearer perspective of what is needed in all of this.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point because you actually talked about it at Token, and I asked you, how do you incentivize people to provide this data, and how do you incentivize them to actually submit all this information?
Yeah.
And you just said that you provide the inflation that they have and how much their prices inflate, and that's super useful. So could you just tell me a bit more about it?
We have a number of investors. I mean, the biggest constituent of users of our data, and we have about some 200,000 active users of our data sets. The biggest constituent is really the hedge fund industry, family offices, people that trade inflation. And what do I mean by trading inflation? They trade $5.5 trillion worth of bonds out there on a monthly on a regular, consistent basis, because those bonds are tied to inflation, right? They're inflationary protected securities or bonds, or in the UK they call them linkers. And so they try to see where interest rates are going to change, and the prediction of interest rates and the outcome of where interest rates are going to go has a significant impact on the yield associated with those bonds. And the yield is a blend of interest rates associated with those bonds that they are paying back on top of the actual, the nominal value of the bond. And then there's a discount to the nominal value based on the duration that it has left and the yield that is on top of inflation. And so the price of that deviates a lot. And so they trade the price differentiation on that, because that at the end of the term, you get it back 1-to-1. So the closer you're to the end of the term, and if it's trading at an 80% discount, for example, and you've only got 1 month to go, you may buy it because you get 100% of the value back at maturity. And so that's what they do, trading it, and they use our data to forecast where is inflation, and then ultimately, what does that mean in terms of Federal Reserve, central banker decisions associated with the interest rates?
Nice, that's super interesting. And you talked a bit about the interest rates.
Yep.
We had a chat about it before the rate cut. But now after it, what's your take on it? That they made the right decision?
Yeah, we've had a huge rate cut, right? We had a 50 basis points drop in the US alone, right? So what's that doing? That's going to unlock some $800 billion worth of liquidity into the market. So all of those bond traders that I was talking about earlier, a lot of them are going to, they've been trading on the 1 month bonds, right? So T-bills, anywhere between 1 month and 3 years. And so those have been paying the highest rewards and needs the shortest lockup. Those over time will get unlocked, and that will mean roughly in the estimate of around $800 billion worth of new liquidity coming into the market. The real question we have around that 800 billion that's coming into the market, as it comes into the market, it won't come all of a sudden, but as it comes into the market, will that be passed on to the retail market, or will that stay in the financial services industry and go towards asset price and asset investment? So they'll put it into the S&P 500, they'll buy more stocks, they'll buy more real estate, and so the price of those assets will appreciate as the demand for those assets are being picked up. We also saw a bazooka of a stimulus in China. I don't know if you saw there, they agreed to reduce the rate at which banks have to hold reserves. So the reserve rate was dropped in China, and that alone will unlock some 200 billion in additional liquidity that the Chinese banks will be able to allow to share. They dropped interest rates as well, and they've given stimulus on the mortgages. So they've given a moratorium or a subsidy on the mortgage repayment. All of those have really, and the market received that amazingly well. I mean, look at how the market's picked up in Hong Kong, in China. The stock markets have picked up again, having been in a lackluster world for the last sort of 2 years since COVID. And yeah, what does that mean? Global liquidity is on the rise. Global liquidity going up, meaning that there is going to be a bigger portion of capital being allocated for risk assets. Risk assets, crypto in the traditional finance world is considered a risk asset. So how do we make crypto and tokenomics, the utility associated with token, the asset class in crypto, how do we make this so attractive that we retain and attract a lot of that new money into crypto land? And then the most important thing from my perspective is keep them in crypto land, right? What do we need to do to keep them in crypto land and not want to off ramp and find off ramps again, but actually find innovative new products, innovative payment services inside crypto land? And I think that's something we need to work towards. And we need to make crypto safe. We need to let people feel comfortable. We need to have a great user experience. All of those things we need to enable and still work on. And I think the amount of developers that have entered into crypto, as we saw at Token 2049, at Solana Breakpoint, at Network Nation, at Stablecoin Summit, right? All of those events, and the SUI event, right? You're seeing all of these events really try to bring out the best in developers and attract new developers into this ecosystem that have those aspects in mind: safety, user experience, and value in terms of the utility.
And based on the argument that you were making earlier on, do you think that we're out of the woods and we have had a soft landing, or do you think we might see a crazy correction in the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're out of the woods. I think we've bottomed out. At least I think, sort of from our perspective, we've reached the bottom in crypto. I think we need to grow and acquire more retail users, not just institutions. And we need to professionalize our service offerings. How do we do that? Who can we work with? And those are things that I think we will be working on in the next short term as well.
And I've read one of your blog posts that was super interesting about the unemployment rate in the US. And you
Yep.
were essentially arguing that it reached a low of like around 3.5% in April 2023, and then 4.3% in July 24. So essentially, we activated the Samru. So could you just tell me a bit more about it and what's your stand on it? that's obviously about unemployment in the US, but it will have an effect on the US economy. And I guess there is like two forces of the Fed cutting rates, but also there might be some increase in the unemployment.
Yeah, I mean, possibly, right? We might see some increase there in the unemployment. We've seen a lot of activity there that that's really changed a lot. Yeah, how do we manage that? How do we deal with that? Um, we've seen small medium businesses actually experience a big decline there, right? And we've seen small medium businesses file for liquidations or bankruptcies. We've seen that pick up. We've seen startups not receive that much in terms of startup activity, and so that's really where we're at, and sort of where's that going to continue to go. We need stimulus in that area. We need to find new ways and new employment opportunities for people. We need to figure out how we scale in this business, how we leverage AI, and figure out things like that. So those are things that we still need to really work on.
Yeah, and just to touch upon like economics again, you were talking about how the current tension within the Middle East could cause the price of oil to sharply go up. And you guys were arguing they might go up to like $150, which is like similar to the price in 1973. So like, do you see any other data like this or any other patterns that investors could potentially use and to identify potential trades that they can capitalize on?
I think we need to lean into innovation, right? We need to lean into crypto. We need to identify new opportunities, and we really need to scale, right? How do we do that? Yeah, I think that's really something we need to um, focus on and really drive. We have technologies like crypto. We have AI. We have clean tech. We have medical tech, right? So we have all of these new classes. We have electric vehicles. We have robots. We have all of these new opportunities. How do we actually lean in to those innovations and really try and drive them forward? And I think that's something we really got to focus on.
And just to bring you back to Trueflation and what you guys do, you've launched the token. So could you just explain the tokenomics and
Yeah.
what's the underlying objective behind the token?
Yeah, we built out the Truflation stream network. So what you can do is data providers are rewarded for contributing data sets, and as well as the extraction of data sets has also the consumption of data sets. You need the tokens for that. So we've actually really had a look at building out that so people can actually consume the data. We've got users that are building on top of Truflation applications, and those all rely on the Truflation stream network as the source of truth and all the underlying data.
You just mentioned that people are building applications on top of you guys. Could you tell me a bit more about that? But also, where exactly do you sit within the blockchain stack? So could you explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, so we're an app chain. So we've built a dedicated application-specific blockchain that allows us to tap into specific services and utilities that have all benefits of a blockchain, yet still allows us to operate at a very targeted capability. So we can have fast streaming of data, but yet we can still be censorship resistant, and we can be transparent, and we can have a decentralized network for maintaining the data sets. All of those are things that we've been working on and building out. And we just launched that about 2 weeks ago. And now we have a constituent of about some 18 node operators maintaining the data and the accuracy of that data. And not only the data, they're actually also verifying and ensuring proof of truth with the governance and the calculation of indexes on that network.
Okay, so the operators are verifying the proof of three on the data that's provided. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
How do you incentivize them? Do you give them tokens as rewards, or what's the reward mechanism there to have like more validators? But also, how can someone become a validator? What are the hardware requirements, and do I need to stake, like slashing mechanisms?
Yeah, so we have staking. We have whitelisting of data providers who equally stake to contribute their data. We have index engineers that develop indexes using our data. They equally have to stake to get whitelisted to work on it. It's a bit more of a permissioned network today. And over time, we want to open it up. And the reason why it's permissioned is because we want quality and verified data sets so that people can work with reliable data sets and we can be trusted as we stream these out into the market and to our customers. And so that's been an important element. So we're just working on improving that and optimizing that.
And could you double down on how do you the requirements to whitelist data providers? How do you choose them? Do they have to apply? What's the process there?
Yeah, at the moment they can apply. They can connect to the network. Generally, we get a lot of people that are interested to help us with the acquisition of developers in the process and data sets as we expand into new markets. We just launched in Argentina. So Argentina is now live. And so that's been a good launch. And then, so as a result out of that, we've got interest from India, we've got interest from Germany. So all of a sudden, new markets have been approaching us around opportunities.
And where are you launching next? You mentioned
Yeah,
a
I
few.
mean, I'll tell you next, but we're going to be launching in a new market within the 1 to 2 months, and then so try to help grow and scale from that.
Nice. And can you tell us the continent? It doesn't need to be the country, but where?
We'll share that a bit later on. I don't want to share it right now.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. And do you have any other further updates or future updates that you're planning to do by the end of this year or hopefully early next year?
Yeah, so we have a number of different activities that we're working on. We're launching in new markets. We have been working on a flat coin. We are working on a index.fun. And so we're just really trying to build out the ability that anybody can create an index and then they can be traded on any marketplace.
Nice. Thank you so much for your time
Thank you
and
very much.
building within the industry, something that's very useful.
We will continue to build and we hope that the market appreciates what we're working on as well.
Thank you so much again.